Okay, let's take a look at this pump package one more time before I ship it out to this job. But you know, we saw the control panel, and its control to control this unit, and I discussed solenoid valves, control wiring, sensors, temperature sensors, etc. So I'm going to point all these out to you. But first I'm going to point out a terminal strip, which is hard to see. It's not really in the right spot. Should be in a different spot. You know, a good spot for it might be over here where you can get at it, but it's actually down underneath everything on the back side of the panel. You know, the reason it's on the panel in the first place is because that's where terminal strips are supposed to go. I could have mounted it here and made its own little panel there. That's what I'd like to do in the future. But there are 25 terminal strips, 25 points down there in the terminal strip that come in and go out. And it's the same number of terminals that's in the pump package itself. It's laid out the same, where there's in the middle there's a green shield point connection for some shielded wiring on a couple of sensors. But the points are different. And what I mean by that is that most of them are the same, but we've got pluses and minuses for each solenoid, so we've got a plus and minus on each terminal, on each point on the terminal strip. And on the control panel itself, we've got all the points for the solenoids go out in the first seven sections of the terminal strip, and then the neutrals come back at another. So there's a little difference between the wiring of this guy and the wiring back on the control panel, but it is all tied back to this cable assembly here. This is 28 wires on a cable, mate and lock, that go back to the control panel. And then out of the terminal strip inside there, we go to all the solenoids, and then we go to this temperature and humidity sensor way back up in the upper corner. We go to a output transmitter, that's the discharge side, and then there's an input transmitter up here on the input water side, and here's a flow meter that measures flow. So if we follow out the actual piping here, we've got input water coming in here. This is this black tube here, 3/8 inch nylon tube. It does come in towards the back of the panel. This panel is 12 inches deep. Comes into the back of the panel. The first thing it comes to comes towards the front of the panel to the the pressure transmitter on the input. There is a pressure gauge, 0 to 100 psi, and then it takes a 90 degree and comes to the input solenoid valve. Again, 24 volts AC, and then it comes to the flow meter itself. And then from the flow meter, it goes into the input side of the pump. We've got a flex hose here to eliminate vibration, a brass union going into a brass pump. Discharge, we've got a pressure regulator here, but we're regulating pressure through the variable frequency drive. Got a pressure regulator here, comes out to a T. We've got a pulsation damper here. This is set at about 120 psi, because we're operating about 160 psi on this. We've got a hose that goes back. This is the discharge side. Hose comes back here, goes to the discharge pressure transmitter. This reads the discharge side and actually controls the speed of the pump. And we got an L here, comes up to a distribution header, we'll call it. Main water comes up here, high pressure water, branches off to all these solenoid valves, and each solenoid valve has its own gauge on it. And then from there they go out the side of the panel to each of the zones. We do have a main pressure gauge up here, 0 to 600 psi, and actually these small ones are 0 to 600 psi. And then there is a valve up here that we use to depressurize the system if we need to for servicing. So that's this pump assembly. There is another control power supply way in the back there that you can't see. It's a 24 volt DC input to 12 volt DC input, and that 12 volts is needed for this Dwyer flow meter. It's a 12 volt assembly. It's kind of too bad because everything else is 24 volts, but so that's converting 24 volts DC to 12 volts DC up to this water meter. So yeah, I guess that's about it. Email me if you got any questions.